Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today is going to be a different video. Today I'm going to do a quick tutorial on how to weight your base. How to what? What does this mean? So let's get started and I'll tell you all about it. Okay, so what I mean by weighting your base is simply adding weight to the base of your model. Here I have a couple of figures that I built a long time ago. And basically the reason I did this originally was because when my kids were young and they'd run around the house and they'd bump into things, you know, if you just have a regular model that's just plastic, it's very light, it gets bumped, it's going to fall over. However, by weighting the base gives it a lot more stability. Also, it just gives a nice feeling to the kit if someone picks it up or you pick it up and, you know, you're moving it around. It just gives you a nice feeling of weight to it. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to do that. And we're going to use my Seaview that I just recently built. I'll link the video to this down below in the description. But on the base on the Seaview, it's very light. Obviously, it's just plastic. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a basic technique I picked up many years ago. And we're going to use some Plaster of Paris. And we're going to very quickly weight this base. First, however, we need to prep the base, so we'll go over that next. Okay, so to do this, you're going to need a few supplies. So the first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to get yourself some dry plaster of Paris. This stuff's super inexpensive. You can get it at any hardware store or hobby store. Well, maybe not this brand, but something similar. Do yourself a favor though, do a little test first. Sometimes when plaster of Paris sets up, it puts off heat. Some of them are hotter than others, so you don't want to expose your plastic to a lot of extra heat. It could cause warping or damage to your base, and you don't want to do that. So get yourself a good brand of plaster of Paris and do a little test first to make sure it'll work for you. Second thing you're going to need to do, well, you got to have your base. You're also going to need just some cold, plain tap water, something that you can mix your plaster in, preferably something disposable. This is an old drink bottle I cut open. For this one, we're going to need a couple of pieces of sheet styrene. I'll show you that in a minute. And then you're going to need a bunch of assorted sizes of just styrene from your modeling trees, from your trees, you know, that your parts come on. We've all got plenty of those. Something to mix the plaster of Paris with, and some super glue and or just your regular model cement. So we also need to do some prep work. So you're going to need a little bit of alcohol, just plain rubbing alcohol, and something to rub down the inside of this with to make sure there's no oils on it and that it's clean. Also, just side note, this is usually easier to do if you do it before you paint and finish your base. But like this, I didn't even think about it. And I was out of plaster of Paris, so I wanted to do this. So anyways, you just have to be a little extra careful now that it's painted, but it's going to be fine. All right, so stand by and we'll start the next step. Okay, so the first step, you want to clean off the inside of your base. To do this, just take a towel, clean towel. Just get some alcohol on it, and you're just going to want to lightly rub down the inside. Careful, don't get any on your paint. You just want to do this to make sure there's no oils or anything on it that would cause the plaster of Paris to not stick to. Okay, so once you've got that, the next step you're going to do, and this is kind of important, if you have a one-piece base, in other words, there's no additional parts glued on, or it's just one flat piece, there's no openings or anything in it. You want, if you do, that's fine. If you have one like that, you don't have to do this part, but because this has these sprues that stick out, we don't want the plaster of Paris to go in these, because what will happen is that as it expands, it could seep out through the joints on the top of our finished product. So what we're going to do to keep that from happening is I have these pieces of styrene sheet. We're just going to glue these on, flat on, to these openings just to kind of keep the plaster of Paris from going in there. Now, they don't have to fit perfect. In fact, if they don't fit perfect, that's better. And I'll tell you why here in a second on the next step. Okay, so the next step, after we've covered these, what we want to do is we want to take some pieces of sprue and we just want to sit them in here Just doesn't matter how many you have, as long as you have a few. And we want to glue these down to the inside of the base. Now, the reason for this is, if you just put your plaster of Paris down with nothing like this in here, it will most likely stick and you'll be fine. However, I have had where the plaster of Paris doesn't adhere very well, and then you turn it over and the whole thing just pops out and you've got a really nice mold of the inside of your base. Not what you want. What we're going to do is we're just going to glue these in here, and these sprues are going to give the plaster of Paris something to hold on to as it dries, because when we pour it in here, it's going to go around all these, and these sprues that are glued in are going to give it an anchor so that the plaster of Paris, when it's dry and it's all in one piece, it won't come falling out. So after we get that part done, then we'll move on to mixing our plaster of Paris. And when you mix this, this is 2 parts plaster of Paris to 1 part water. And it doesn't have to be exact. You just want to put it in, add some water, mix it up. You kind of want it to be the consistency of pancake batter maybe. You don't want it watery, and you don't want it so thick you got to spatula it in. You just want to be able, we're just going to want to pour this in here and then let it set up. And one other thing you'll need to do is you'll need to have a way to have your base sit nice and level. You don't want it sitting crooked anyway, because once we pour this in, we got to let it set up. And if you have your base, however you manage to get it so that it lays nice and flat, that's going to be the best thing to do, because then your plaster of Paris is going to dry level and it'll be flat. And when you're done, it'll look just like a nice flat white base. And when you turn it over, you'll just have nice weight to the base, but you won't see the plaster of Paris, and it'll be nice and neat. Okay, so let's get on to the next steps. Okay, so here we have our base, and as you can see, I've glued in these little plastic pieces to cover the holes for the risers here on the thing. I've glued in my extra pieces of sprue, and when we pour our stuff in now, that's going to grab hold. And even these pieces here, they hang over the holes, which is great because the plaster is going to go down underneath here and over it, and these are also going to give it strength, so there's no chance it's going to just come popping out. Now, it will crack if you drop it. It could break and shatter inside there, but I've actually done that before, and they, for the most part, as long as you have this sub framework in here, a lot of it still holds on. And the cool thing is, if that did happen, you just mix up some more plaster of Paris, pour it in, let it fill in the gaps, wiggle it around a little bit to settle it in, let it dry, you're good to go. All right, also I have this paint cap here, which I have found, if I set this on here just right, it's pretty level. So we're going to use this to hold our base down level, so when it dries nice and flat. Okay, here we have our plaster of Paris. And I've just poured some out into this little cup. I don't know how much this is. There's nothing on here. And we have our mixer, or mixing container, and we have our water. So follow the instructions on whatever brand of plaster of Paris that you buy to make sure you're mixing it right. Also, you want to make sure there's nothing in here that could react with the plaster of Paris, so make sure it's just clean. And you should be good to go. We have our mixer here, so we are going to go ahead. And remember, on mine, it was 2 parts plaster of Paris to 1 part water. So we'll just roughly measure out 1 part water. That's probably a little too much. So we're going to start off with about half of that first. There we go. And remember, this does not have to be perfect. It just needs to be, like I said, the consistency of like pancake batter. And I'm realizing now that this mixing container I have here is not the best because it has a bunch of grooves and things in the bottom. But I think it's going to work out okay. We'll just gently work it all in here. We want to make sure we get all the powder out. Again, you just want it like pancake batter. We'll keep mixing it. Now this stuff, if you mix it properly, it sits up pretty quick. I mean, within a couple hours, it's going to sit up. I typically let it sit overnight and to make sure it's nice and solid. So I might have a little too much water in here. and not enough plaster of Paris. Let me see if I can mix a little more in. Yeah, I'm going to have to add a little bit. So let me go grab some more. Hold on. Okay, so we are going to mix a little more of the plaster of Paris in here. And we're going to mix that in. Yeah, I really should have. I looked all over for a paper cup or plastic cup, something like that, that I could just get rid of. I couldn't find anything. This is just going to make a mess. Also, what you want to remember is this stuff will set up pretty quickly once you get it mixed. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start pouring it in here because I think this consistency is right about enough. So we're just going to pour it in here. Let's bring this into the camera view here a little better. Make sure we're level. We're going to pour in. Okay. We're just going to kind of move it around a little bit. Make sure it covers all of our items here. All of our extra sprues that we put in there. And you may see some bubbles in here. That's okay. It'll dry fine. No one's ever going to see the bottom of it unless you do a YouTube video and show the bottom of it. Put a little more in here. Just let it ooze in. Okay. Now, you can fill this up right to the edge of the line if you want. I typically don't. Like I said, no one's ever going to see this. So for me, that's going to be enough weight to give the base substantialness to it, to where when it's sitting on the shelf, someone bumps the shelf, it's not going to topple over. It's going to be a pretty solid base. You can see it sets up really quick. It's already on my hand. So basically what I like to do is just kind of jiggle it around a little bit while it's soft. Make sure it's getting into all those cracks and crevices we created so it's got something to hold on to. And right here is when you just stop, you set it aside, or you just walk away. Give it a few hours and then come back and check it out, which is exactly what we're going to do. So stand by. Okay, friends, we're back, and as you can see, my plaster of Paris has set up great. It feels cold, which is good. I still will let this sit overnight because I want it to really set up nice and hard. But, you know, there it is. I mean, it was that quick and easy. It doesn't take a lot of time. Just do a little prep work, and you can easily weight your base. And then you've got a nice substantial base to put your models on that's going to help keep them sturdy on the shelf. And now I will add, you can just paint over this if you want. There's no need to. I've never really seen any like deterioration from this. I have on some, I have put a clear coat over and just to seal it. But I've never really had an issue either way. So that's kind of a personal preference of yours. You could also paint it black, or paint it a color that you want, a dark gray or a gray, whatever you want, to match everything else. But again, you know, you're not really going to see it. And also, like I said, we covered those holes, so we didn't have to worry about any of the plaster of Paris seeping through these joints here, and it didn't. And yeah, this feels really nice. I'm happy with it, and I hope this little tutorial helps you guys out there. If you have any questions, leave me a comment down below, and I'll do what I can to answer all the questions you might have. Also, I will link down below the link to the full build of the Seaview on my channel, so you can check that out. Please, if you haven't already, if you could just hit that subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it. It helps me out a lot. And yeah, so thanks very much. Everyone be safe out there and go build something.